533 matches or C, 555 matches? We'll be back with the answer later on.
You're listening to Unexpected Elements from the BBC World Service. I'm Molly Chatterton. This is the show that hunts for the science behind the headlines. So far, with the Olympic Games opening in Paris, we've looked at surfing, which in a titanic effort we've taken out of this world, and climbing has led us to look for kills from gravity-defying geckos. Now it's my pick, and I choose another new sport for the Games, breakdancing, which, according to our next guest, owes a lot to a good understanding of physics. Hello, Amy.
Hello.
Welcome to Unexpected Elements. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Can I get you to introduce yourself?
I'm Dr. Amy Cope. I'm from Clemson, South Carolina, and I teach a physics of sports class here.
Nice. And what got you looking at the wonderful world of breakdancing?
Well, I love looking at new unique sports for my class, and I found out this year they were doing breaking for the first time as an Olympic sport.
Have you tried it?
My daughter and I got down on the floor and we tried to go back, and we were very unsuccessful, but we had fun.
So let's break down the breakdancing then. What categories of move have we got? What kind of physics is involved? Maybe what's the lingo involved?
Well, there are three basic types of moves. One is top rock, and in top rock, our athlete is going to be doing more traditional hip hop dance. So lots of jumping around. And then there's down rock, and the down rock is what we traditionally think of as breakdancing, where our athlete is spinning on their body, their back, their head. They're going to be doing a lot of moves on the floor. And then the last major type of move is going to be the freeze. And in the freeze, mid-dance, the athlete is going to stop all motion and freeze in a very precarious-looking position.
And now I just want to check with Phyllis and Camilla. I want to know how universal breakdancing is. Phyllis, is breakdancing much of a thing in Kenya?
Yes, recently I've seen so many people, especially the young ones, of course, really get into breakdancing.
And Camilla, I mean, Brazil's always been sort of mecca for dancing.
Yeah, we love to dance, and yeah, breakdancing is also big in Brazil. Brazil there has a huge urban culture, so you have a lot of breakdancers across the country.
So, if you want to be the best of the best, is it worth knowing a bit of physics to help your breakdancing skills?
Well, personally, I think the physics is always going to help you, but there are a lot of spinning moves that occur in breakdance. And one move that you might think about is the traditional move where the breakdancer is spinning around with their head on the ground. So they're in a headstand, they put their head down, and then they push themselves in a circular path with their hands. Now, they can go fairly fast in this manner, but where this gets really tricky and where the physics comes in is that about that axis that they're rotating, they're going to pull their arms in and their legs in as close to their axis of rotation as possible, and this allows them to go around much more quickly. And it's called conservation of angular momentum.
So what's going on when you pull your limbs in?
Well, what's happening there is that the moment of inertia, which is the distribution of mass, and the rate that you're turning always have to be a constant. So whenever your arms are outstretched, your mass is far away from that rotation axis, and your angular velocity is slow. But whenever you pull your arms in, your mass is close to that axis of rotation, and the only thing that can result then is that your angular speed has to increase.
And what about the clothes that they wear? Is that important in the performance that they give?
Pretty much every other Olympic sport, there is a very defined outfit that the athletes have to wear. But in breakdancing, the athlete chooses something that matches their personality. There are some very important things. One is with the shoes. The shoes are going to need to have a very good grip on them, because the athletes, and they're jumping back and forth in their top rock, they want to make sure that they have a very good grip with the surface so they don't slip. However, just the opposite thing is going to happen with the down rock moves. In the down rock moves, our athlete wants to spin about some axis. Maybe it's a point on their back or on their head. What they need to make sure of is that there's very minimal friction between those surfaces and the floor, because once our athlete starts spinning, they want the spin to continue. And if there's like lettering, plasticized lettering on the back of the outfit, or if our athlete has hair that's going to get tangled as they spin upside down on the floor, that's actually going to have friction reduce their speed, and then they won't spin quite as fast or quite as long.
And I've seen some of the dancers do these moves where you mentioned the third class of the moves. It's the get into a ridiculous position and then just freeze whilst you're holding it. How does the physics of that work? I mean, it looks impossible.
It does look impossible. So very often whenever you see these freeze moves, these athletes are going to be down on the floor doing this move. They're usually going to have one appendage in contact with the floor, often an arm or a head. And what the physics can help them here is by looking at their center of mass. So our center of mass is typically going to be around our belly button. So to do these freeze positions, our athlete has to balance their center of mass over whatever appendage is touching the floor. And that's going to be most critical.
Do you think the breakdancers are aware of all this physics that's going on whilst they're performing?
I don't know if they would know the terminology behind all of it, but I can guarantee you that as they are trying to perform a spin, they know they need to crunch in tight in order to go faster, and they know they need to get their mass lower to the ground to be more stable.
Phyllis, Camilla, do you think you now have the appropriate physics to be an Olympic breakdancer?
Maybe, but not the upper body strength.
Yeah, we've got it in theory, Amy. So it's just it's just the practice.
If I may, I'm just curious, Dr. Amy. You know, Manny has talked about physics and you really explaining it so well. But I'm curious about genes. Can I blame genes for not being a breakdance good?
I don't know if people are born breakdancers, but I was certainly born not a breakdancer. I do not have the genetic makeup for it.
You and me too.
Thank you, Dr. Amy Pope, for giving us the 101 on the physics of breakdance. So I hope that all of our listeners now will watch the breakdancing at the Olympics with a renewed sense of, I don't know, superiority, that they're going, oh yes, well that's angular momentum, that's what that guy's doing. Thank you, Amy. So the Olympics in Paris has set us talking surfing, but on Saturn's moon, climbing, but with the Gecko Masters, and breakdancing, thanks to physics. Unexpected Elements goes looking for the bigger answers. Hear about the enormous dinosaur that emerged thanks to climate change, the huge transport developments turning Paris into a megacity, and we tackle a listener question about everything in the universe. Just what is it made of? That's all coming up shortly on Unexpected Elements.
This is the BBC World Service, where Heart and Soul explores stories of faith and spirituality.
I asked where his belief in Ka-ong, the whale god, came from. He tells me that growing up he learnt to pray to the whale. It's something passed on from generation to generation.
There is such a respect and such an understanding that we are life force energy interconnected with every other life force energy.
It had been 8 years now since Timothy Weeks, as he was known then, was held captive by the Taliban. They were incredibly shocked when I told them I was going to become a Muslim, and they did not support me at all.
I wanted to understand why I'm here and what a compassionate response to that would look like.
Heart and Soul. Listen Fridays at 12:30 and 21:30 GMT or at bbcworldservice.com/heartandsoul.
Coming up after the news, Unexpected Elements goes looking for the big science, like the enormous dinosaur that scientists have found thanks to climate change. We look at the Olympic transport developments turning Paris into a megacity, and biggest and best, we tackle a listener question about everything in the universe. Just what is it made of? That's Unexpected Elements, coming up shortly.
BBC News with David Harper. The Paris Olympics has opened with a grand display of French culture and heritage, and the world's top athletes sailing down the River Seine in heavy rain. The Olympic flames used to light a huge cauldron on a hot air balloon that rose high into the Paris sky. A wildfire that has destroyed a third of the buildings in the tourist town of Jasper in the Canadian Rockies is still burning out of control. The entire population of Jasper has been evacuated. Donald Trump has launched a scathing denunciation of Kamala Harris at a Christian Conservative political conference, with insights that the race for the White House is tightening. Mr. Trump described his likely opponent in Kamala's election as a radical liberal and a bum. Panama has accused Venezuela of blocking a flight carrying former Latin American leaders to observe Sunday's presidential election in Venezuela. They say they were hoping to witness an opposition victory on Sunday. Taiwan is to close one of its last remaining nuclear reactors, which has reached the end of its scheduled 40-year life. The planned shutdown of the Mashan Reactor 1 on Saturday will leave Taiwan with the sole remaining reactor, which is due to close next year. The US Secretary of State Antony Blinken has arrived in Laos to attend a meeting of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, on the day after his Russian and Chinese counterparts had their own meeting with ASEAN ministers. The court in the US state of Missouri has ordered a healthcare company to pay almost $500 million in compensation and damages after its specialized formula for premature babies was linked to bowel disease. Abbott Laboratories tried to have the verdict overturned. G20 finance ministers meeting in Rio de Janeiro have agreed in principle to try to make the global super rich pay their taxes. The gathering stopped short of making proposals by Brazil for a minimum tax on the wealthiest individuals. BBC News.
This is Unexpected Elements from the BBC World Service. I'm Lovely Chesterton in Cardiff in the UK, and I'm joined from two different continents representing South America. We have
Camila Mota in Fortaleza, Brazil.
And over in Africa we have
Phyllis Mote in Nairobi, Kenya.
Phyllis, Camilla and I avidly reading the news. We keep searching for stories that haven't hit the big time. Maybe it's something from our part of the world that deserves more of an audience. Good solid link there. We call it Under the Radar. So, who has something to share this week?
I brought an Under the Radar this week from under the ground of the southernmost state in Brazil, Rio Grande do Sul. In recent years, strong evidence has emerged that this part of the planet was the first land of the dinosaurs, where they seemingly appeared 230 million years ago. So hold on to that information. Bonnie, you might have heard a few months ago that southern Brazil was ravaged by torrential rainfall.
Yeah, I saw the terrible pictures. I saw it being compared to Hurricane Katrina in the Philippines. Sorry about that.
That's right. There's a lot of rebuilding going on, and authorities are still assessing the damages. But one of the surprising fallouts from the floods actually has to do with dinosaurs. The water erosion removed so much soil in the Santa Maria Formation that it exposed a 233-million-year-old dino fossil. Paleontologists from the Federal University of Santa Maria extracted it and are now working to clean it up and determine which species species it belongs to.
So this fossil was happily sat there for 230 million years, and climate change has dug it up and exposed it once more.
Yeah, isn't it crazy? A paleontologist from the team involved in the excavation was saying they decided to do a field expedition as soon as the rain gave a break because they knew the possibility of finding something was high, but at the same time were hurrying because they were afraid that additional rain could actually destroy whatever material that had been unearthed. But they were lucky. The skeleton they found seems to be almost complete, which is something extremely rare and makes this finding so valuable. They are thrilled.
They are thrilled, and I bet they're also thrilled that they get to keep it, because one of the most complete dinosaur skeletons ever found was sold last week at an auction in New York for a staggering $44 million.
$44 million. I saw that. A stegosaurus from 150 million years ago. And you know what's interesting? We won't see this one sold for a record price. Brazil is one of the few countries with legislation that protects fossils and forbids their commercialization, along with Argentina, China, Mongolia. But fossil trade is a booming market with successive auction records in recent years, and the whole conversation about the Stegosaurus record price was that some billionaires and celebrities are preferring them over traditional artwork now.
Which is really annoying because, you know, it just puts the prices up. So instead of, say, bidding on a Picasso, rich people are investing in a Tyrannosaurus Rex cranium.
That's exactly right. Actors Leonardo DiCaprio and Nicolas Cage, for example, have been interested in dinosaur fossils for years. They actually got into a bidding war over the skull of a Tyrannosaurus bataar, which Cage eventually bought for $276,000, but had to give back a few years later when it was discovered that the fossil had been illegally imported from Mongolia. Mongolia, alongside with Brazil, forbids the export of fossils, and Brazil has also gotten a few fossils back over the years, some with huge public engagement. I remember one memorable and recent case involved the fossil of a Pirajara jubatus, quirky feathered dinosaur. It was smuggled from the region where I am now, because northeastern Brazil is also a paradise for paleontologists, back in the 1990s, and returned only last year from Germany after a lot of pressure and a big social media campaign. It's now permanently on display in a museum in a city close by, and I hope to get to see it soon.
Why should we all know more about this story? Is it because of the fuss over selling them to film stars? Is it that we should know more so that more countries have the same legislation as Brazil to protect them? Or is it that climate change might dig up some more fossils in the future?
I think it's everything together. There's so much to discuss about this. Wouldn't you want to see like a complete dinosaur skeleton in a museum rather than being it in a celebrity home enclosed? I don't know. There's a lot to talk about.
My top take home is that if anyone wants their own fossil and they can't afford a T-Rex or a Stegosaurus, buy some chalk. You know, chalk is loads and loads of tiny, tiny microfossils of plankton. And yes, that's less imposing than a Stegosaurus, but you do get more of them for your money. So there you go.
And you won't have to give it back.
You won't have to give it back. It's all yours. Now we're on to one of my favourite bits of Unexpected Elements, which is reading out the emails and messages that you've sent us through the week. So our first listener has obviously been listening to our podcast because we spoke about jet lag a few weeks ago on the show. Camilla, do you want to take this one?
Of course. Hi there, Juan from Havana here, as always enjoying the show. Wow, jet lag. I remember suffering from it when I was in Edinburgh for a month of summer school. Oof, it was 9 a.m. and we were at the faculty and I was falling asleep because my body was sure it was still 4 a.m. Thanks for your always so useful and entertaining show. Hugs from your #1 human fan, JC. Gracias por escucharnos, Juan.
Yes, hugs accepted, Juan. Thank you very much. Phyllis, I don't know. Have you done any jet setting recently? Are you a jet lagger?
Not recently, so this was before COVID, to New York, and whew, I suffered. But then I blamed it on my pregnancy because at that time I was pregnant, but I ended up sleeping, not having to see most of New York as I had planned.
Oh, no.
As that listener says, that was an oof moment.
Phyllis, staying with you, maybe you'd like to read out the next one.
Yeah, sure. So many for the past couple of weeks, I think you've been discussing how we all perceive the world differently.
Yeah.
How some people see weekdays as colors or dates in a calendar, So this email is similar, and it reads, "Hi, I'm Stephen from Perth, Australia. I have always seen weekdays as a 400 meters restaurant containing a fortnight of days. Monday starts on the straight, and Friday is at the end of the straight. Saturday and Sunday are on the curve, and the Monday starts again on the fast straight. You asked us listeners whether it helps calculating days ahead. The answer is a resounding no. I do, however, see months as a clock face. It's very easy to work out 5 months from October if you think 5 hours from 10 a.m. 3 p.m. equals March. I recently saw a friend count months on his fingers and feel my method should be taught at school. Love your work, Stephen."
This feels like it's going to run this one, and if anyone else has any more insights to add, please do send them to unexpected@bbc.co.uk. It turns out some people see things in their heads, particularly dates, in very specific ways that, I personally just don't. But it's like there's a subset of the population that has some sort of amazingly physical representation of a mental calendar.
Now thinking about it, maybe I see the week as a mountain. We climb further away from the weekend, and then we climb back closer to it. I don't know if it makes sense. Wednesday would be like the peak of the mountain.
Hang on, is the weekend base camp, or is the weekend?
Yes.
Okay, so what's the top of the mountain?
Unfortunately, Wednesday, because you're super tired and you're like, oh my god, now I have to go back. Maybe it's counterintuitive. Maybe the weekend should be the peak. I don't know. I have to think this through.
Don't overthink it. Just let your subconscious do it for you. That's what we're learning from all of these things.
Good advice, yeah.
Now, sometimes our listeners just like sharing their own findings or musings, and Alistair wrote in to say, "Hello, Marnie and team. Great show. Thank you very much. Discovered the other day that there happens to be a phobia of long words, and I can't for the life of me remember how I found this out, or why I was digging around in that sort of area, or even more pertinently, what it all has to do with hippos. But I just wanted to share. Best wishes, avid listener, Alistair." And the phobia of long words is, are we ready for this? It's hippopotamonstrosquididaliophobia.
Good job.
Ironically, it's not a recognised diagnosis, but it is supposedly the fear of ridicule when mispronouncing words. So, and the irony being that hippopotamonstrosquididaliophobia is definitely something that you get halfway through and think, this is going badly, I should stop. And along these lines, I have in my script a word that I'm not going to even dare say out of fear of ridicule, or mainly just because I can't pronounce it. It's one of the longest words in the Welsh language, and I've just heard that we've got Owen Jones, Welsh speaker, who is going to come in and tell us how to say it properly. Are we ready for this?
Oh my god, he doesn't need to read it. Okay.
Okay, one more time.
Anfair wrth gwyngyll o ger y chwyn drobwll tan dysilio go go go.
And a round of applause for Owen.
Very much.
What does that mean?
I don't know.
Thank you. You have done well. You may leave. just one of the longest train station names ever. It's amazing. So, our theme this week is the Paris Olympics, starting at the weekend, and still to come on the show, we'll be looking at how the French capital will become a megacity in preparation. We'll also be asking what makes up the continents of the universe, tackling the big questions on unexpected elements. That's coming up after this.
It's Quizman Dan here, back with the answer to this week's quiz question. Earlier, we looked at one of the new events being added to the next Olympic Games taking place in Los Angeles in 2028, the racket sport squash. We asked you about the Pakistani squash player Jahangir Khan and how many matches he won in a row during his longest ever winning streak. A, 111 games, B, 333 games, or C, 555 games? Well, we can reveal the correct answer is, incredibly, C. For 5.5 years between 1981 and 1986, Khan won 555 consecutive games, which is officially recognised as the longest winning streak by any athlete in top-level professional sport. Award yourself a gold medal if you got that one right.
The bag of texts, emails, voice notes, and occasionally a very lucky postcard that we get from our listeners, there's always a question waiting for an answer. This week we had a question from Asuka who wrote, "Hello from Singapore. I have a question which nothing on the internet can answer. What does the universe consist of, or is made of?" Asuka. Interesting question. What is it made of? So we know about stars, planets, and the other bits and bobs we can see in the night sky, but what else is there that hides from sight? Well, I know someone who might know.
Hi, my name is Malcolm Fairbairn, and I'm a professor at King's College London, and I work at the intersection of astrophysics, particle physics, and cosmology.
So that is all the physics. Okay, Malcolm, what's the answer?
The first thing to say is there's a lot of atoms in the universe, what I would refer to as normal stuff. It's about 73.9% hydrogen, 24% helium, 1% oxygen, some carbon, neon, iron, nitrogen. Everything that's more heavy than hydrogen and helium is created in dying stars, and the heavier elements, so any elements that have got a higher mass than rubidium, are produced by quite extraordinary things like merging neutron stars that lead to big explosions. They are energetic enough to produce those higher mass elements. And so that's all the stuff that's made out of atoms that we're familiar with, but we think the universe is made out of lots more stuff as well. So the universe is expanding, but the rate at which the universe expands depends on how much stuff there is in it. And all of those elements that I told you about is not nearly enough to explain how quickly the universe is observed to expand. So when we look at galaxies and galaxy clusters, we see that all the atoms and the normal stuff, there's not nearly enough of that stuff to make them behave and rotate the way that they're observed to behave. So we think there's a bunch of dark matter. We think that all the elements, it's only 4% of the total stuff that's in the universe. And we think about 36% is this dark matter. Now, dark matter sounds terribly exotic, but it's just like normal matter, but you can't see it. It's invisible. You can't bounce light off it. When I look at somebody, I can see them because light is bouncing off them, but you can't bounce light off dark matter. Apart from that, it's more or less the same as the particles we're made out of. It's just different particles. The problem is we don't know what those particles are. We've never been able to discover them or create them. We're still trying to figure out what they are.
So 4% stuff we can see, 96% stuff we're pretty sure is there, but we haven't managed to find it yet. Thank you, Malcolm Fairbairn and Asuka, for the question. And if you have a question for the team, you can email us on unexpected@bbc.co.uk, or our WhatsApp number for voice notes or texts is +44 330 678 3080. I also love a postcard. So the address for that is Unexpected Elements, BBC World Service, Cardiff, CF10 4GA in the UK. As we said at the start of this show, the Paris Olympics has been all over the news this week. with lots of talk about how the city prepared for the Games. It's estimated that 15 million people will visit the Games, and that's to a place that's already one of the most popular tourist destinations in the world. Monday's Business Daily on the BBC World Service set my mind spinning as they discussed an amazing plan to turn this city into a mega city by adding some new public transport.
I'm John Lawrence. Today, how a massive extension of Paris's underground rail system is about to transform this city. Thanks to this development, people arriving at Orly Airport for the Olympic Games will be able to take an underground train straight to Saint-Denis on the other side of town, where most of the athletic events are taking place. And that's just the hors d'oeuvre, because the Grand Paris Express, or Greater Paris Express, is the biggest urban development project in Europe.
It's the doubling of all the metro lines in Paris. It's 330 kilometers of new lines and 70 new stations.
It could be good for business and make what is small capital city closer.
More and more of us are live in cities like that in the coming decades, and projects like Paris's are going to become more common. So why don't we take the chance to build our cities better? Because 60% of the buildings for future megacities don't yet exist, and the current ones and the folks that live in them are facing a barrage from climate change. Here's the BBC's Ritla Shah talking to Rachel Huxley, head of mitigation at the Wellcome Foundation.
We've got 55% of the global population living in cities. That was in 2018. It's gone up since then. It's expected to grow to sort of 60-80% by 2050. And where that's growing most rapidly, and in many parts of the existing urban areas, we've got high vulnerabilities in terms of sort of informal settlements, and even where it's not things like informal settlements in this country, we've got buildings and urban form that just is not adapting well to the extremes of heat or the flooding that we're going to be facing. So it's that confluence of people, but it's also urban form, the kinds of activities that are happening in cities can exacerbate, for example, heating, air conditioning, unfortunately. It might make it cooler inside the particular house, but it makes the entire sort of urban environment much warmer. So we've got a real problem there in terms of sort of a solution that makes the whole situation worse, as it were. So those sorts of activities, cars, any sort of machinery that's pumping out heat is going to increase the urban heat island effect. And then also the materials, the paving, the roofing that we use will exacerbate heat in urban areas up to sort of 1 or more degrees higher than the surrounding areas. So it's a very significant amount of heating that you'll be getting.
But it doesn't need to be this way. Building better is the subject of a recent episode on the World Service's climate show, The Climate Question. And here's host Jordan Dunbar speaking to BBC Arabic Egypt correspondent Sally Nabil inside an ancient house that can offer inspiration to modern builders.
It sounds amazing where you are. Can you paint a picture right now of where you're standing?
Actually, it's a brilliant place here. As soon as we stepped into the house, we forgot all about the hustle and bustle of Cairo, and we've been hit by a cold breeze immediately, though there are no air cons here, no fans, but just very old techniques of cooling that are very environment friendly and saves a lot of energy.
Sally, you've just said that it's a cold breeze and it's calm and quiet in one of Africa's biggest megacities.
Exactly.
This is incredible.
You can hear my sound echoing through the staircase because it's so quiet, and Cairo is known for being absolutely noisy and crowded, but here it's like a retreat from the crazy city.
One of the reasons that this house is cool is because of these wind catchers. I've never actually seen a wind catcher before. What do they look like?
I'm going up on top of the building to the rooftop. so that I can see them myself. It's my first time to see them. Let me open this wooden door. And here are the wind catchers. They are on the rooftop. They are more or less like a wooden hexagon figure. It's like a wooden chimney full of holes that allows a cold breeze, but it keeps the heat out and it helps the air to circulate throughout the whole building. And the impressive thing is, it has been done with a very clear artistic touch. It's not just...
It's beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an eye catcher, not just a wind catcher.
Phyllis, Camilla, you're both from hotter places than Wales. Have you come across something like this?
Oh yeah, urban planners and architects are resorting to all sorts of initiatives. I've seen wind catchers. I've also seen something called cross ventilation, which it matters where you put your windows, to build a corridor for ventilation. There's thermal induction system, which is used for air cooling and for taking advantage of natural light. So yeah, there's a lot of interesting ideas. Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah, I've seen that in the south of the States, so in New Orleans. So there's the front door, and then there's a clear line to the back door, and so you can keep the screen door closed and the main door open, and just have the wind sort of whistle through it. So there are solutions out there, but as host Jordan Dunbar discussed with urban planner Wissam Elukta, that's not what's fashionable.
My apartment is in a big glass and steel tower.
Yeah.
Could really be anywhere, couldn't it?
Yeah, I mean, you could be in Vancouver, you could be in Toronto. That background that I can see from you, it's become a very dominant form of identity. In some cases, glass buildings are being built in hot climates, and that's a really big problem because you just have to spend a lot more on cooling.
Air conditioning. Right?
Air conditioning. That energy has to come from somewhere.
Phyllis, I find this fascinating because just around the corner from the BBC Nairobi Bureau is a relatively new looking building that's entirely, basically just a big glass box. And it looks very smart, but I couldn't help but think on a sunny day, that's probably the last place you would be, right?
I think so, Manny, but as the expert there said, on the inside there's ventilation, AC and all that, but then you'd wonder on the outside. I've heard him say that people on the outside get affected by this, so it makes the environment kind of warm. So you can imagine the people who have set up buildings out there or who, work on the outside there. I imagine it's not funny for them, especially in Nairobi, which is relatively hot most times of the year.
Right, and Nairobi's also quite dusty, so I imagine there'll be someone permanently washing the windows because there are so many of them. I guess it'll keep people in jobs.
That's what I wanted to tell you, because you know what? Many young people in Kenya are looking for jobs, so more jobs for them, and yeah, win-win.
I still think if you're going to build more of a mega city, that maybe biomimicry and kind of the natural methods might be easier and cheaper. We're coming to the end of the show. It feels like we've gone from Olympic Games, unexpected element style, so that's lunar surfing, lizard climbing and the physics of breakdancing, to the infrastructure upgrades that Paris has been pushed into. Thank you to the team for your Olympic efforts this week in Nairobi, Kenya. Phyllis Mwate, thank you.
Asante sana Mani, thank you.
And in northeast Brazil, Camilla Mota, thank you.
Obrigada, Mani, thank you.
I'm Marnie Chesterton. The producer was Alex Mansfield with Harrison Lewis, Dan Welsh and Noah Dowling. Join us next week for more Unexpected Elements.
This is the BBC World Service, and in the forum, we'll look at what's enthralled people about mountains throughout history, as well as when and why people thought that climbing them was a good idea.
That human experience of challenge, adversity, understanding consequences, and managing the risk.
The Forum, History of Mountaineering, today at 11 GMT. In half an hour, we hear some amazing sports stories.
I'm ex-footballer Robert Earnshaw, and I'm taking us to Zambia. Zambian football's amazing response to the tragedy in 1993 inspired a whole generation to defy all expectations in a true David and Goliath story.
This is the BBC World Service, the world's radio station.
Hello and welcome to the newsroom.
Bonsoir, bienvenue à Paris.
Lady Gaga thrilling the crowds by singing in French. Paris converted into an open-air auditorium.
As the Olympic flag is raised to start the Games, we look at the sporting and security challenges ahead. Also today at 4 hours GMT with me, Nick Myers. At a campaign rally, Donald Trump launches a vitriolic attack on his presidential rival, Kamala Harris. As Venezuela bars some election observers from entering the country, we look at the chances that Sunday's presidential vote will be free and fair. And later on,
a living fossil thought to have been extinct over 2 million years. Oh my God.
with lots of new shark films out in cinemas and on streaming sites, we hear about the lasting impact on sharks and on our relationship with them. Hello, I'm David Hunt. The first full day of competition in the Paris Olympics is due to get underway after an elaborate rain-soaked opening ceremony. Diving, fencing and rugby sevens are events in which athletes are competing for gold medals. One of the most keenly anticipated contests is the women's 400-metre freestyle swimming, in which the Australian Ariana Titmus will defend her Olympic title against her American rival Katie Ledecky. On Friday, hundreds of thousands of people watched the 4-hour opening ceremony.